You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
Manfred Zimmel uses numerology, astrology, and cycles to determine market timing. He's been writing the Amanita Market Forecasting Letter since 2000, and during that period, he's been ranked high on the Market Timers Digest many times. Amanita Market Forecasting is online at amanita.at. Manfred Zimmel is speaking to us from Vienna, Austria. Manfred, welcome back to HowStreet.com radio.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for having me on the show again.
First, please tell us about your newsletter and how people can find out more about it.
Yes, it's a newsletter that has been published for more than 15 years now, so it has been operating for a long time, which is, of course, a good sign. And you find a lot on the website in the free area on www.amanita.at. And then there is, of course, the premium area, where you have the actual market letter, because what's in the free area is just more or less a basic overview, also some related articles or very long-term stuff. But yeah, the real market letter is in the premium area.
What indicators seem to be working best at the moment for predicting markets? Numerology, astrology, or cycles, and what do they see for the future?
Yeah, basically everything of that. I use so many different methods, approaches, and I'm still expanding on that. For instance, since we've talked in August, I've studied a lot the indicators. We get the clues from some publications or movies, like, for instance, the cover of The Economist, which is quite telling. I mean, it was very telling also last year. And now the Economist cover for 2016 came out in late 2015. And I found very interesting stuff in it. So you see how they plan the year ahead. Like, for instance, the cover for the year 2014, which was published more than 1 year ago, contained a date on the cover. And this date was the date of the Paris terror attacks, which was labeled kind of a French or European 9/11, because it was the biggest terror attack in many years at least. And you see how this date was already put out almost 1 year before it happened. So you know everything is planned here, and the key is to understand the plans of the elites, to decode the plans, and then this says a lot about the future. I mean, but the cover, for instance, is of The Economist. It's a little bit more calm than the one of 2015. The 2016 cover is, for instance, has no nuclear bomb on it. There was a nuclear bomb for the 2015 cover. There was the China explosion in August, which was actually a neutron bomb that exploded. We can be quite sure about that. And the former nuclear inspector of the International Nuclear Energy Office, he said, he confirmed that this was indeed a nuclear bomb that went off in China. And so this is basically good news. It should not be as dramatic as 2015, but my expectation is we're now in the 7 years of tribulation, and the second half of the 7 years is the Great Tribulation. So this is just kind of a preparation for the second half, where still every year the tension on all levels, economically, financially, militarily, then finally in the health level, it's building up. So what I expect is that more or less each year is more kind of crisis prone and more dramatic than the year before, until 2022, which should see the climax. And so we are heading step by step. We're heading forward, and spring 2016 is this year's escalation maximum. We see a lot building up here, And what is, of course, most dangerous is what's setting up the geopolitical level where, one of my forecasts has been for a long time that the Union plan says it, and also many prophecies like that Turkey will be torn into pieces, blowing the whole Middle East up, which is, of course, kind of the center of the planet, revolving around the war of Christianity against Islam. And it seems this spring will be quite hot, stretching into early summer, and then the situation on all levels will cool down a little bit.
Do you foresee any black swan events in 2016 or 2017?
Yes, I have 4 dates for 2016. The first one was already here. It was January 9th. You could call it, I call it the Amanita crash model. You could also call it the black swan model. And it was modeled to predict the extraordinary events, especially crashes and all kinds of escalations. And I want to keep the remaining dates for my premium subscribers. The first date was spot on. Just on the 4th of January, the bottom fell out of the stock markets. Also, like other markets like high yield bonds started to crash, micro bonds. So it was precisely in the days around January 9th when, in a way, the first bomb of the year went off. And there are 3 other dates this year, and the one in the spring should be the most important one.
Globally, short-term and long-term, do you see inflation or deflation?
Clearly, I see inflation now. I've called for a bottom for 2014 and 15 for a long time. And you already see that the inflation is even in the rigged official numbers. You see it at multi-year highs, meanwhile, in North America and Europe. And I expect inflation to rise into 2024 because this should be the inflation high of our lifetime. Very, very high inflation. It depends on many factors how high it will be. There should be one kind of deflationary period in between these 8 years, but the big trend should now be inflation again for years to come.
Governments have been accused of not giving us the real inflation numbers. Are they faking the numbers, and are they much higher than what they publish?
Yes, of course. But even the bigger problem is that the inflation concept used today is no longer valid. I defined some years ago, the concept of Amanita inflation, which is meant to discount the inflation that is now created but not seen until years or even generations into the future. So what we have is, for instance, the biggest example is you're using nuclear power plants, and you have basically many unresolved issues around that. It creates a lot of very dangerous waste, and so far, if we don't find a solution, at least this is the point. We have to keep this nuclear waste for like 1 million years or so. So when you calculate the costs of safe storage for 1 million years of this waste, and you discount it into the present, you arrive at huge inflation numbers because there is destruction going on everywhere, but it's not immediately seen. It's like when you take a credit, when you have a credit, you consume now and have to pay it back later. So it's a kind of, actually a kind of a game, because in a way, all credit is fraud, because it gives you the opportunity to do something which you couldn't do now, and promise it to solve in the future this problem or to pay it back. And until the 20th century, these effects of the Amanita inflation, they were quite small. It really started with nuclear energy, all this stuff, also with electrosmog, EMF radiation, where I'm quite sure inflation globally is already running at 30 to 50% at least. It could also be 50 to 100%. If we take all the factors in, the burden we put on the future generations. So officially we're putting now like the burden on the next 1,000 generations with the nuclear waste. And when you take all that into consideration, inflation would be incredibly high. And even if you don't do that, if you just use the normal inflation, concept, what is normally used as living costs, you arrive at a much higher inflation that all the governments of the world are giving. And there are also many reasons for that. For instance, like when you take an apple is still the same apple that it was like 50 years ago in the statistics, but the quality is much worse than it was. Because like 50 years ago, the average apple was still much more healthy and had much more like vitamins and whatever compared to an apple today. So what you have a deterioration on all levels, which is not taken into consideration at all. And then of course you have like the usual statistical gimmicks where you, put it into equation like all kind of fantasy parameters saying like, okay, it's not much better, this car is not much better, it's improved, and this is how the actual value is much bigger, so you boost GDP numbers and then you lower inflation numbers. But I mean, you can see it just in everyday life. What you see is like 50 years ago, the average household was just the man was working. They could afford actually more than most people can afford today, at least in the Western world. 2 people are working, and even then they are not, they don't have enough money with just one job. So the number of people living from 2 or 3 different jobs is just exploding, and then they're just living, on the edge. So this is really telling you what is going on, the big picture. I mean, of course, it has gotten much more unequal. So what you see is that you have a much higher number of very rich people, but this is just, a very, very small number. Well, now the middle class has been collapsing in the last 10 years or so. In the West, at least, North America and Europe, in many countries it's almost completely gone. It's of course much better in the rest of the world, like China or so, where a new middle class is arising. But what's going on in the West is just the opposite.
Are bank bail-ins in Canada, the U.S., and around the world becoming more likely?
Yes, of course, every year now for the coming 7 years, although I don't think that 2016 will be a big default year. It should be postponed more, 2017 and especially 2018, and then going bigger into 2019. And 2016, I think, it has a much higher risk than normally, or what is considered normal by historical standards. But it should be rather calm. It should be kept under control.
Do you think gold and silver are manipulated? And if so, could they easily be manipulated higher instead of lower?
Yeah, this happened before. It happened in 2011, where you could see, especially like in April 2011, what they did with silver, which had an extreme explosion in just weeks and then months. This was a manipulation to the upside, yeah. So basically it's happening in both directions. For instance, now since 2011, each year precious metals were weak before year end and then very strong after the beginning of the year. And this year was no exception here. Because, it's a kind of a window undressing. So at the last day of the year, the gold positions are officially very low in value. Just the opposite what happened to stocks, who just were quite high until the last trading day of the year 2015. Then dropped off on the first trading day of 2016. The opposite happened with gold and silver. And this is a kind of also unwinding the manipulation, which you could say it's a manipulation higher than of an artificially suppressed price in late 2015.
Where do you see gold between now and this summer?
Yeah, I'm quite bullish for 2016 for gold, mainly in US dollar, the main trading currency, and not so much in the other, maybe stronger currencies, but it should head up in the coming months. It has already done a lot of that, what expected this year, so it was the biggest rally in a long time, what we've seen in the past 7 weeks. So I don't think there is too much left, at least some upside potential.
Is silver likely to outperform gold?
Yes, I'm quite sure that it should, after many years of being much weaker than gold. Over the next year, 2016 and 17, it should be stronger than gold, yes. The ratio has already topped out, so gold and silver have been flat for many months now, and eventually the trend should turn and favor silver.
We'll have more with Manfred Zimmel right after the break.
Unbelievable harmony, spectacular performance, the ultimate tribute to the Everly Brothers and Simon & Garfunkel. Bird Dog and the Vintage Electric Band coming to Fort Langley, Mission, White Rock, West Vancouver. Buy online and save at ontourtickets.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Manfred Zimmel from Amanita Market Forecasting in Austria. Manfred, everyone's talking about the oil market collapse. The world's becoming more energy efficient. Will the world require more or less oil going forward? And where do you see the price of oil between now and this summer?
Well, I think the supply and demand from the economics textbook, they are more or less useless or even totally misleading in this situation. In the past year or so, the oil price was quite similar to what happened to precious metals prices in 2013, when demand was at an all-time high, and yet prices crashed. And yeah, it's quite similar here. I mean, this is nothing but a political game around the oil price, of course, and it's a very dangerous game. So it started basically with first punishing Russia, which is still highly dependent on the oil price, and is doing much worse now on all levels because of the oil price plunge. So this was the punishment of Russia after it, defined clear borders in the conflict with Ukraine. And what is going on now is between Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Russia, very, very strange situation. You know, especially last year, suddenly two enemies like Russia and Saudi Arabia, they were side on side, suddenly allies, which is very, very strange. It's hard to predict how long it will last. But, there was obviously the plan to first suppress the oil price for a long time, so low that especially like shale production, whatever, they are way too expensive. So to destroy supply, and in the next step, of course, to create a new oil shock. And this is the big event that could change everything. It of course depends totally on the geopolitical situation, and there might be a 1 second event pushing oil prices, also probably gold prices, then in a second so much higher than it was before. So this is a game. You see, first suppress the price of oil for a very long time, and then push it up. And there is one window, and it's also during this summer, where it could explode at the peak of the geopolitical crisis that is unfolding. There are actually many scenarios how it could be precisely unfold. I'm not sure about that, but The only clear point is whatever, in which way it will precisely unfold, it will drive the oil price higher. So this is a big question mark here for me. It could do very little, but it could also go through the roof, like 500% higher or even more, or going up maybe even to $500 a barrel. I can't predict it in a way it will happen. I say it's a realistic option later this year, especially during the summer. It has to be watched. It's kind of the situation or the setup is like an option out of the money. So if it gets triggered, the profit will be huge, but maybe it doesn't get triggered at all, and then there will be not much price action. I certainly do favor the scenario of a price explosion, but it's maybe not the final one. It's just a smaller one and maybe not the 1 second event. We'll see.
Is the bond market still in a bubble, or is this the new normal, and how do bonds look short-term and long-term?
You see, especially since this year, when it started in January, it began also with a crash of like micro bonds, high yield bonds, and all the weaker segment of the bond market, which is the only place in the bond market where you have market forces at work, or let's call it dominant, because in nature, part of the bond market, it's just a political decision. And here again, it's the same setup. There could be an event or a decision made which could send interest rates so much higher. In a second. It's rather similar to what happened to the Swiss franc twice. You know, we had it for 40 months, which is an interesting number. It's the 40. The Swiss franc had the peg to the euro, and it was mentally, verbally, officially defended until the last day, and then suddenly they said, "Oh, we have changed our mind. You know, let's drop it." And it might be similar then to interest rates. I said, "Oh boy, it was just very stupid what we did. This zero interest rate policy and whatever. Let's forget about it and you know, let's introduce normal interest rates, which are of course much higher now." So I'm not sure when exactly this event will come, or if it will unfold in a 1 second event or as a process over a longer time. But yeah, it's coming in the next years. You see the signs everywhere. Although I think 2017 will be more revealing on this level, will be producing a big leap in the bond market. 2016 I still see as kind of mixed or questionable.
What will those higher interest rates mean to people who have taken part in the huge real estate bubbles in places like Vancouver and Toronto, where house values have gone up 30% in 1 year?
Yeah, it's of course bad news. It's always like that when you have, when you have bubbles unfolding, there is usually a very clear order, and this is that the real estate bubble is the last one. And in the past months, you saw like the biggest bubbles that were left. A few bubbles were left, just crashing. Like for instance, London, one of the most expensive places on the planet. It lost more than 15% in a very short time. And yeah, the air is getting very thin for real estate, and especially for all those who have a mortgage, which of course have a very bleak outlook for them.
Do you see credit spreads shrinking or widening, and does your research see a possible panic or crash ahead?
Yes, as I said, it's I expect this bump to go off sooner or later. I'm not totally sure about the timing. It is planned that way. So it might be more a natural spreading, or it might be compressed to 1 second. I don't see very good arguments in one or another scenario, so I'm not sure about that.
And going back to real estate in Canada, the U.S., and around the world, is there any difference in the markets, or is it one big, global situation?
Well, sure. Of course, real estate is always the most local of all markets. There is no centralized, trading platform or whatever. So there are always opportunities to find, even in bubble markets. It's just whatever special situations. But by and large, I don't see any big difference, at least not in the Western world, which is very similar economic and political problems. And at least not in the coming 2 or 3 years. It might split off, or it might diverge from 2019 on for political reasons. But so far, there is little reason to believe, big differences are ahead next 2 or 3 years.
Is there a 7-year cycle for bull and bear markets?
Yes, this is a cycle that changes with every Shabbat year, which is the Saturn year, which was 2014-15. And 2014-15 was the end of the 7 good years, which started in 2008-9. And now we're heading down for 7 years. You can track the cycle back centuries, and it should be very dominant, of course, this time. So heading down into 2022, where you have bad times, and the features of bad times are higher interest rates, lower stock prices, higher inflation, political instability, social unrest, riots, war.
The S&P 500 and the Dow, are they finished a correcting phase, or is this a bounce before they head lower?
Yeah, we are in a bear market until 2017, so all rallies should be sold. And you can see the patterns, the chart patterns, they look really awful. I can also see it in my models, because you can see the surprises, whether they come to the upside or to the downside. It's a sign whether you're in a bear market or a bull market, and I haven't seen that, of course, for many years, that all surprises come to the downside since 2015, which is yet another confirmation of an ongoing bear market.
Where do you see the S&P 500 and the Dow between now and this summer, and do you see any potential important key dates?
Yes, I do see global stock markets heading lower and bottoming out during the summer, and then seeing a short rebound, which is Elliott wave 4, and then a final 5th wave down into 2017.
Does the U.S. dollar look like it's topped?
Absolutely. So I have expected for a long time, early 2016 should be the final U.S. dollar top, and this has been the case. It's now quite weak against, almost all other major currencies, and it should be quite weak for most of 2016.
Are you bullish on the Canadian dollar versus the U.S. dollar, and why did the Canadian dollar plunge recently?
Yeah, the Canadian dollar as a commodity currency was certainly pulled down, like the other commodity currencies, which was a byproduct of the artificial suppression of the oil price mainly, also of the gold price and of other commodities. And the rest is now, at least against the US dollar, almost all currencies, all major currencies should now be bullish. Although I don't expect big trends to unfold, it's just, the trend is down for the dollar, up for the Canadian dollar then, but not very big trends like 30, 50, or even more percentage points, more in the region like of 10 or 15% or so.
Between now and this summer, which currencies look strong and which ones look weak? The U.S. dollar, the euro, the Swiss franc, the ruble, how about the ruble? Although some people would say it was rubble. The yen, the yuan, and the Canadian dollar.
Yeah, my favorite here is the euro, and also to a lesser degree the ruble and the yen. The yuan, I don't think it will make much. I mean, when you see people, everybody talking of the yuan going down so much, it's a sign it won't happen. But there is a war going against the Chinese yuan. It's I won't totally say it won't happen, or that it can't happen. So there is a little bit of uncertainty too for me regarding the Chinese currency. But I'm quite sure that the euro should be the strongest one most of the year 2016.
What do you see happening in the world markets? Europe, China, Japan, and Russia?
Yeah. What we see is, especially China, of course, there's a war against both the currency and then the stock market also. And apart from that, I don't see any investment opportunities, to put it that way, because even Russia, which is quite dependent on the oil price, I think is only then a very good choice if we see the big oil shock I was talking of. In all other scenarios, I don't see that Russia can totally decouple from the rest of the world.
Do you have important key dates, and do they apply to specific markets?
Yes, but I want to keep them for my premium subscribers, because this is the very specific information for the decisions. And specific markets, I had the pivots I had for many years for each of the markets. I had a separate model, but it was already years ago that I discontinued that, because most turns are very, very close to each other. Like mid-January was a time when most markets turned, like stock markets bottoming out on the 20th, the US dollar topping. Within just a few days, long-term reversals were printed, and it's usually the same for most turns. And so it's much more meaningful to have just the pivots for the market in general, and then have other factors for each market that say, yeah, it's bullish or bearish or whatever.
Could the 2016 presidential election in the U.S. significantly affect markets?
No, I don't think so. It's first of all, of course, it's all presidents, at least in the past half century, are nothing but puppets. And probably the last one who made a difference was Kennedy, who was assassinated because he wanted to, introduce real money, government, lawful money, and not Federal Reserve notes. And so it's for more than 50 years, nobody has ever made it to the White House who was not totally controlled. And especially now with the voting machines, it's totally easy to produce the results, the election results they like. I mean, I don't think any of the elections mean anything. I mean, they can pull up it 10% up or down with the voting machines, however they like it. I mean, it's also controlled by them, the software and whatever. So even if there are surprises now, eventually it won't make a difference.
Manfred, many times you mentioned during our interview that your premium newsletter would have a lot more information in it that people could use precisely. How can people find out more about the newsletter?
Yes, please go to www.amanita.at, which is AMANITA, and you will find the subscription information, also a lot of articles, free stuff, the FAQ and whatever. You can. The site is very, very big. It has more than 1,000 different pages actually over the years. So you can stay there for a long time if you like it, and you will find a lot of information also in the free area.
Manfred, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Manfred Zimmel from Amanita Market Forecasting. He's been speaking to us from, I would like to say, Wien, Österreich, but most people would know it as Vienna, Austria. Did I pronounce it right?
Wien is correct, yes.
Okay, Österreich?
Österreich, yes.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Jim.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.